Now it's time to take a look at what's making waves on the internet. James Creedon.
Hi, Shona.
Back in the normal last week, we were switched. This
Indeed.
is much more natural.
Through the looking glass.
Though, hey, I mean, I enjoyed it. So you're looking at the coverage of Hurricane Harvey this evening, starting with the use of social media to help in rescue efforts, with people asking for help on social media instead of actually calling just 911.
That's right. So they were leveraging the power of social media essentially to get an SOS out there to say, look, we need help. We're here. We're in this particular location, giving an address, giving various other details. And it worked. It did actually manage in many cases to get people the help that they needed. Now, actually, the Coast Guard and other emergency services weren't always very happy about it, because what it ended up doing was dispersing the requests for help across different media, if you like. And so there were calls by the Coast Guard to stick to those phone numbers that centralise those requests for help, and even just 911. But here are a couple of examples of those tweets, etc., that did manage to get people help. There was one here, in fact, from a woman who was heavily pregnant, and you can see that her case was logged. She gave an address, was logged with the Cajun Navy. I'm not sure what that is, but they had a ticketing system, and so you had members of the public, in fact, picking up on these requests and actually doing something about it to get them some help. There were also sports stars using the power of social media to raise funds using websites such as youcaring.com, which actually crashed at one point because so many people were using it. That's a sports star from Texas who was one of the many who, in fact, who went on social media and said, look, direct your funds here. And that helped.
What about how reporters have been covering the story? I suppose that they're also using these kinds of tweets and calls for help in their reporting.
That's right. And even just some big reporters for the New York Times, for example, Clifford Krauss, well, it affected him. His home was flooded. Houston, fourth biggest metropolitan area in the US. You've got a lot of people living there who work for major media, whatnot, and they were affected by this. And so he spoke of having to move everything up to the second floor, of his piano being destroyed, the dog, reacting as you would expect, but actually looking out the window the next morning and seeing evacuations of other houses, people in a much worse situation than he was. So this was very, very close to home for some reporters. Then you had some reporters relying on social media, as we're often doing now, to figure out what was going on in the streets, and picking up on false information, because people are really
gullible.
But also the people who are doing this, who are sharing false information, are just, I don't know what's, it's hard to understand them, but there you go.
They're looking for humor in the most difficult situations.
That's right. They're disconnected from reality, maybe, but there you go. They're not there in any case, and they're sharing these images. And then you had it's appearing on Fox News and other networks. So that's another way in which I suppose the modern news system and various different media, social media, is being used and misused. And I suppose a word of caution in that regard. And then there was the guy who was given a 6-pack of beer by a woman who happened to be out in the street, and she just wanted to do that. So, all right. So a huge variety, I suppose, of reporter experiences.
There was also a CNN reporter who, during a live broadcast, helped someone get rescued. They were in a truck or.
That's right. That's right. Another factor that I felt... She hailed
down a police car and...
Because, in fact, what you had was live reporting being mixed up with real-life emergency situations.
Right, she was actually an actor in that situation. And she wasn't just reporting.
What occurred to me when I was looking at some of those scenes is, would people actually want to be broadcast? Would they want images of them in distress like that being broadcast across television? So I think there was probably some grey zones.
Some ethics questions.
There was probably some grey zones where the live reporting was going on, and actually what was going on behind, in the scenes behind, perhaps not. People don't necessarily want to be broadcast across the nation or the world in that kind of way.
They're the most vulnerable, and they have, the nothing to help them. So inevitably, this is also a very political story. We remember, Hurricane Katrina, how George Bush was completely dogged by that for the rest of his presidency, the way that he handled that. Even in the MTV Music Awards, who was it that called him out on Hurricane Katrina?
Right.
How is Trump responding to some of the criticism that is inevitably, against him?
That's right. Well, I mean, the political angle is definitely there, and you can see headlines like this in The Independent in the UK. Trump criticised for not meeting Harvey victims and marvelling at the crowd size during the trip. That seems to have been a big miscalculation for him to talk about the crowd size. What a crowd, what a turnout.
This isn't a baseball game.
Right, and that did lead inevitably to cartoons like that. Congratulations to the people that came to see me. What a turnout. As some said, well, maybe it's because their homes were flooded. They had nowhere to go. Melania Trump's high heels as she boarded that plane as well. Of course, that's got a huge amount of news coverage. She did change.
Stan Smith's.
She did change when she got to Texas, but it did get some criticism. Others pointing out, I just want to say it very briefly, Sierra Leone, a mudslide, 1,000 people dead. News coverage can, of course, be very unequal depending on the reality of the human suffering, and there were lots of other cases of human suffering in the past week. As this tweet says, Houston, Mumbai, Niger, and indeed Sierra Leone.
All in the past week.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, James, for being there with the eye on what's going on in the media.